Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by my partner in crime, Wes Hodkowitz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field. And, Wes, unfortunately, we have another Packers defeat to talk about, the 7th in 8 games. This one, very different style of game than what we've been used to seeing here with the Green Bay Packers. This one was a shootout at Lincoln Financial Field on Sunday Night Football. Game was tied 20-20 at one point in the second quarter. Eagles pulled away. Packers couldn't catch up. Final score 40-33. And at the end of the day, it was a rough night on defense and a couple of very regrettable mistakes on offense that were the difference in this game.
Yeah, and it was funny because now obviously you're not sitting here last week thinking 363 rushing yards allowed or anything like that, but what was the number one thing you and I were talking about? It's like this Eagles offense is not going to stay down much longer. They had off performances against Washington and against Indianapolis, and they brought all of it in this game against the Packers. Ultimately, a lot of things you can break down here as to why the Packers lost that game, but for me, it's missed tackles.
Yeah.
And Matt LaFleur said at his Monday press conference, 20 missed tackles. That's the most during his time here as the Packers
He actually
head
said he
coach.
thought it was more than 20 as they were going through. He said Sunday night after the game, the live charts had indicated that the Packers were keeping it indicated 15 missed tackles, and then after the coaches reviewed the film on Monday, the number climbed above 20 somewhere. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just when you have a quarterback like Jalen Hurts, a legitimate MVP candidate, a guy that is he's like a battery of energy. Like it's just this Energizer bunny kind of thing where he is able to take plays. Like I've never seen anybody like this in terms of if it breaks down, you get him into the open field. He's like a running back, but if he has time to throw, he has the arm talent to make you pay. The touchdown pass that he had there, I mean, he is an all-around playmaker. And for the Packers, if you get a hand on him, you have to get him to the ground. And Green Bay didn't do enough of that in this game. As you said, a shootout from the very beginning, 14-13 in the first quarter. I thought this was very interesting. I guess that was the most points scored in an NFL first quarter this season. I would have thought it would have been more than 27, but That's the way it's worked out. And the Packers did some really good things in this game offensively. But defensively, we talked week after week after week about the complementary football component of this thing, and defensively, Green Bay just didn't have very many answers for the Eagles.
Yeah, the 20-plus missed tackles obviously really stood out. And you said it in terms of getting a hand on Jalen Hurts. But that's not enough,
No.
and it's not enough to get one guy to the football because, yes, the Packers can't miss that many tackles, but he's also, and not just him, but it was Miles Sanders. It was also the receivers on some short routes and things where they were breaking tackles. But defense is all about getting enough guys to the football where if there is a missed tackle, the play doesn't rupture into a big gain.
Yes.
And the Packers defensively way too often we're leaving it all on one guy to make a tackle in an open field situation, and nobody else was there to help clean it up. So when there was a missed tackle, it wasn't just a couple of extra yards. It was a garden variety play turning into an explosive or a ruptured type of play that was really damaging. Jalen Hurts and Miles Sanders combining for 300 of the 363 rushing yards. Philadelphia goes 8 for 15 on third down, also converts a couple of fourth downs. When the third and long they got close enough to then be able to convert on fourth down. It was just a really, really rough night for the defense. They had essentially 3 good possessions defensively. They got a 4th and 1 stop early in the game on Jalen Hurts, which was a key point early for the Packers to stay in this game. There was a fumble and a recovery and long return by Quay Walker that set up the Packers for some points. And then there was also a 3-and-out in the midst there. But other than those 3 possessions, the Eagles basically scored every time they had the ball. And then on the final possession of the game with a minute to go, they ran the ball 3 times, moved the chains, and kneeled out the clock. Just not enough stops, and just a very frustrating way to lose when the Packers offense, which has struggled so much, only getting the 17 points against Tennessee the week before, not being able to win in Detroit when the Lions only score 15 points
Right.
and not being able to get that victory. To have a season high with 33 points and to come up short, it's just a different way to swallow another tough loss, I guess, for lack of a better phrase.
There was three things that I kind of walked away from with this thing, no pun intended, for our award-winning Packers.com show. Three things. But there were three things I walked away from. One, the Packers' schedule this year is probably one of the most difficult I think I've seen in my time on the beat. The way it's worked out, the layup games, Washington, the New York Jets, Giants, they all ended up being a lot more competitive this year than we imagined.
All three of those teams might make the playoffs now, when at the beginning of the season, nobody was putting any of those three teams in the playoffs.
Especially now with Mike White at quarterback.
Nobody would have said after Thanksgiving that all three of those teams would be above 500 fighting for a playoff spot, but that's where we are.
There was basically one team that I think has kind of been what everybody thought they were, and no disrespect to them because we'll talk about them on Thursday. It's the Bears.
Right.
This season, who are still in the midst of a rebuild. So that was my first thing I took away. Two, the disheartening part about this, most difficult thing to swallow is the Packers were within 7 points still of the number one seed right now in the NFC.
Yeah.
And to be able to put up 33 points on that defense, Philadelphia, they do what they do, man. They're not going to deviate from it. They're going to try to apply pressure with their front, and they're going to be able to create opportunities on the back end. That's the way it's predicated. But they were able to move the football. They were able to run the ball against them. But ultimately, you still fall short. And three, the part that makes this difficult to swallow is in a year in which I really truly believe any of the 7 teams that make the playoffs in the NFC are going to have a realistic shot at the Super Bowl, it's getting to be more and more dire here for Green Bay trying to stay in that race. I think it was a 2% or whatever they put it at right now for the Packers' playoff chances. When they've had opportunities, they've come up short. And when I say short, I mean I'm literally talking within a score or two. Mm-hmm. It's just they haven't really gotten blown out for the most part this season. But the teams that are able to pull together, that are able to, overcome the adversity, are able to, in an imperfect game, find the most answers. Those are the teams that win. And Green Bay was so good at that the last few years. And this year, it's just been a situation where you can't get the yin and yang quite to fit.
Yeah.
And this was another game of it. Keyshawn Nixon has a phenomenal performance as a kickoff returner. They get a 53-yarder to midfield late in the game, and they go 3-and-out afterwards. It's those type of things that when something goes well, you just haven't been able to build that momentum.
Yeah, and it's also been a case of anytime a mistake is made, it ends up proving really, really costly because you end up losing these games by such close scores. You mentioned Nixon, who had a phenomenal night, 52-yard, 53-yard, 38-yard kickoff return. But what happened on an early kickoff return? He flubbed one, then he ended up slipping and falling at the 9-yard line.
Yep.
And then what happens there? Aaron Rodgers ends up throwing an interception on a ball that gets deflected. Philadelphia has a short field and they get a touchdown. It all traces back to the fact that possession started at the 9-yard line instead of starting at the 25 if you just take the touchback, that kind of thing. And I don't mean to pick on Nixon because, as I said, he had a great night and he more than made up for his mistake. But my point is that every time this Packers team makes a mistake, it proves absolutely critical and costly to them because they just don't have the margin for error to overcome those kinds of things. In a game that clearly the Packers defense was struggling, the offense was going to have to score as much as possible to keep up. An opportunity to put points on the board, the Packers are knocking on the door, but Aaron Rodgers throws an interception when he and Tyler Davis, the tight end, are not on the same page. Rodgers thinks that Davis is going to stay up the seam. Davis keeps his route flat coming across. Rodgers, after the game, said he regretted throwing the ball because they weren't on the same page, but he saw, even though he wasn't running the route he was expecting, he decided to give him a chance anyway, threw it anyway. Well, the backup safety Blankenship for the Eagles ends up undercutting the route and picking it off. He's in the game because C.J. Gardner-Johnson had gotten injured earlier. That interception took points off the board for the Packers, and that was another mistake you cannot afford in that type of game the way it was unfolding. as this game ultimately unfolded, Aaron Rodgers leaves with an injury to his ribs, extremely painful, very uncomfortable. What we heard on Monday is a lot of tests still being done, nothing definitive yet on the diagnosis. Rodgers was feeling better. He would like to keep playing as long as everything checks out okay. Very much up in the air at this point as to where that's going to go. Jordan Love stepped in the fourth quarter and led the Packers to 2 scoring drives. Yep. 63-yard touchdown pass to Christian Watson on the catch and run. And then late in the game, couple cracks at the end zone there that would have possibly gotten the Packers within 3 points, but settle for the field goal to get the game to the onside kick there at the end. But Jordan Love, 2 possessions and 10 points. Very interesting here because he played well in a tough spot, and if with the Packers at 4-8, if they do get mathematically eliminated from playoff contention, there are going to be discussions as to whether Jordan Love should play out the rest of the season. This was in a very small sample size, just 2 possessions, but it was a pretty impressive outing for the young man, showing a heck of a lot of progress from what we saw last year in Kansas City and in Detroit when he played roughly a game and a half in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about this game was, well, one, the fact that that first third down conversion for the entire game for Green Bay came on the 7-yard out that Love threw to Lazard. Again, that sort of illustrates one of the issues Green Bay's had this year. Last year, they were good on third downs. They were good in the red zone. Those 2 areas have just been kind of difficult. But when you look at it from Love's perspective, and he even talked about it afterwards, the confidence that he felt after that to be able to get into a rhythm, you saw it, and I thought it carried through the rest of the game. The Eagles aren't the type of team that are going to throw 6 guys at you every single time. So, I mean, they were kind of sitting back a little bit, trying to eat up some clock.
They had a multi-score lead. They were not their whole plan was to not get gashed for the big play, exactly. But then it happened anyway because Christian Watson was just too darn fast.
And let's also be honest and let's be fair to Love here. He put that ball exactly where it needed to be for Watson to be able to continue to hit all cylinders.
No question.
20.97 miles per hour, whatever it was that Next Gen Stats had him clocked at. This guy, I keep saying it, Mike. I mean, his speed is prodigious. I mean, it is. I have not seen an athlete like this at his size.
Yeah.
I mean, He is a monstrous dude.
Right.
That runs like a track star.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And he didn't even. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, you mentioned the Next Gen Stat thing where he was clocked at just a shade under 21 miles per hour. It didn't look like he was running that fast. I mean, it looked like he was running that fast because he was running away from the defenders, but it didn't look like he was even necessarily giving it 100%. And I'm not saying that he wasn't. It just doesn't look like that because it looks so effortless for him. It's amazing. It's amazing how he can get up to that kind of speed and make it look so easy.
Well, it reminds me of when I was in high school and there was these guys that would always like...
You could run 21 miles an hour?
Yeah, yes. It was a big time for me. I was going to go pro like Uncle Rico. But, it'd be those guys that sit there and they rev their trucks and they're really getting the thing going. And they're going like 6 miles an hour. But then you see some of these like real sports car type things and those things just zoom and you don't hear anything, right?
Right.
That's Watson.
Right.
It's interesting talking to him and seeing him, and how he worked with the media. Matt Schneidman and I were interviewing him afterwards while everyone else was talking to Jordan Love, and the guy carries himself like a professional. I'm so excited to see where his career is going to go. I mean, up once again for the NFL Rookie of the Week honors. I mean, this guy is, if he can stay healthy, you love everything you've seen from him. As it relates, though, to your initial question, when you look at Jordan Love, last year against Kansas City was a tough spot for him to be thrown into. Rodgers gets, pops with COVID, so he's thrown in there, and it is the true definition of a spot start, right?
Yeah.
It's a defense that threw the kitchen sink at him. He struggled against it. Detroit Week 18 was just a total mess, and everything and how they approached it. What I liked about this is he stood tall in the pocket. He was decisive, and you want to talk about a guy that looked like he knew what he was doing after 3 years now almost in this scheme. It was very impressive to see. Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback. Everybody's saying it. Matt LaFleur said it on Monday. If he's healthy, if he's cleared with this rib injury, he will play against Chicago. But when you look at Jordan Love and you're looking for markers of his improvement, I thought this game, his 146 passer rating, it showed you not only his potential, but how he was seamlessly able to sort of integrate himself in with this offense. This is a guy that's had a lot of snaps in practice, Mike, with Christian Watson, with that first-team offensive line when Rodgers hasn't been able to go.
Right.
You can tell the difference there in the comfort level when he was out there this year.
Yeah, and it was interesting, too, because Matt LaFleur actually talked about what might have been Jordan Love's most impressive throw of the 9 pass attempts that he had in the game was actually one of the 3 incompletions where he's trying to hit Aaron Jones on, some people call it a hole shot, others call it honey hole. What that is a reference to is a sideline route where the intended receiver, in this case it's a running back in Aaron Jones, is in between a short corner and a deep safety. And in order to fit that pass in there, you've got to fire it, because if you put any kind of touch or loft on it, it's going to hang in the air for too long, and one of the defenders is going to get there in time.
Or your receiver's going to get lit up.
Right, exactly. You're going to leave your receiver hanging out to dry, and he's going to get clobbered if he's trying to catch it while keeping his feet in bounds.
Yeah.
And Jordan Love saw the opportunity for the hole shot against Aaron Jones down the sideline, and he let it rip. And Jones wasn't able to catch it. I'm sure he would say he would love to have that one back. He made a great catch in the back of the end zone on an Aaron Rodgers scramble drill earlier in the game that got the Packers a big touchdown. But that throw from Jordan Love right there shows you something about the progress, the confidence, everything about the footwork and the timing and all of that. So very interested to see what happens here with the Packers at quarterback moving forward. Aaron Rodgers has said, obviously, if he's cleared and the Packers still have a chance, he would like to keep playing. Realistically, the Packers are one loss away from really there not being any more math on their side whatsoever. You get to 9 losses, the best you can finish is 8-9. The way things look in the NFC right now, it looks like 9-8 will maybe get one of the final playoff spots, and there's even no guarantee of that at this point, depending on how things shake out. So maybe we're going to see more of Jordan Love moving forward. Hopefully, whoever it is at quarterback for the Packers this week against the Bears, Rodgers or Love, hopefully the Packers can get a win and avoid that 9th loss at least for a little while longer, and then you see what happens. I want to get to. And you mentioned on our next show, we'll talk about the Chicago Bears. I want to get to what was really a very wild week of football in the NFL in Week 12 after a little bit of sponsor business here. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50 years of better. Week 12 in the NFL, Wes. 11 games.
Yeah.
Decided by 1 score or less, obviously, 8 points or less. 11 games in 1 week. We're talking about 2 overtime games where Cleveland beats Tampa Bay and the Raiders beat the Seahawks on the road on an 86-yard touchdown run in overtime, one of the longest, maybe the longest walk-off touchdown in the history of the league. I don't know. You have 2 other games that come down to coaches deciding down by 1 to go for 2 in the last 15 seconds of the fourth quarter. Rather than kick and play for overtime, they go for 2. Both the Chargers and the Jaguars get the 2-point conversions, and they win those games. And the game with Jacksonville against Baltimore ends up coming down to a 67-yard field goal attempt by Justin Tucker. The Washington Commanders, who have now won 6 of their last 7, they end up winning a close one at home against the Atlanta Falcons when a ball is tipped and intercepted at the goal line in the last minute, a minute and a half, or 2 minutes, or whatever was left on the clock. Just another, game after game in this league, week after week. These games, so many of them are so close. You have to find a way to win. And at the end of the day, the teams that find a way most often are the ones that still get to play late into January, and everybody else is licking their wounds, so to speak. But this past week, Week 12 in the NFL, was absolutely the epitome of what this league is about and how any game at any moment can just turn on a dime.
And let's not even talk about Sunday, too. Look at Thursday.
Yeah, well, I am including the Thursday games in the 11 games decided
absolutely.
by one score. That's looking at the entire week in general, including the Thanksgiving games.
But Thursday night, as I'm in my turkey coma, I get done watching the Cowboys in Giants, which ends up going right down to the wire. Then I'm watching, the Vikings and Patriots, who, out of all the variables that you never see happening with a matchup, Bill Belichick's team losing because of special teams.
Yeah, two major blunders on special teams by a Bill Belichick team.
Yeah.
That cost his team what would be what would have been a huge victory in that AFC East race for New England.
And then Josh Allen comes back, just absolutely rips the heart out of the Detroit Lions. I mean, just unbelievable. And again, this is what premium Pro Bowl, All-Pro type talent, that's what they do.
Yeah.
They make craziness happen. And I'm sitting there then on Sunday in my hotel room waiting for us to get, to go to the game, and you're seeing Trevor Lawrence throw some of the hardest balls that I've ever seen. I mean, it is incredible, the passes he was throwing and the decisiveness. And
he had to drive the Jaguars. I want to say it was close to 90 yards for that final touchdown, and he is throwing rockets.
Darts. I felt bad for his receivers' hands by the time.
And the 2-point conversion was a 2-yard missile to the pylon.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like he just was not holding back. That was impressive.
And as you talked about, watching these teams, Doug Peterson, all right, we got the touchdown. We're going for the win. We're not playing for this overtime business.
And Brandon Staley for the Chargers did the same thing. Another guy that the decision doesn't surprise you based on their track record, right? That's the way these guys
100%
coach their teams.
And the tragic thing again for Green Bay is 4-7 Raiders knocking off the Seahawks. So now the 49ers are actually the top seed right now in the NFC West, and Seattle is kind of, outside looking in now again. You had the Buccaneers lost again. There's just things actually tilted pretty well towards Green Bay's favor in terms of these matchups, and you weren't able to capitalize on it. So it is what it is, but in terms of the entertainment side of this thing, certainly was a very interesting weekend of football, going all the way from Thursday into, well, realistically, even Monday night, with the shenanigans at the end of that game, too, between the Steelers and Colts.
Right. I mean, here, one other thing I want to touch on before we go, because this is not a team that we have talked about much. They're not on the Packers schedule. And we haven't talked about them since last January when they came into Lambeau Field and knocked the Packers off in the playoffs. And, of course, I'm talking about the San Francisco 49ers. And I take nothing away from the Philadelphia Eagles. They are 10-1. They look like they are really tough to beat. The Minnesota Vikings bounced back on a short week from getting shellacked by the Cowboys, posted a big home win over the New England Patriots on Thanksgiving night. The Vikings have just 2 losses on the year. They look like they are headed to the playoffs and will be a threat to make a deep playoff run. But I'm telling you, if for my money, right now, the most dangerous team in the NFC is the San Francisco 49ers. That team, and it's not just because they added Christian McCaffrey to that offense, and because I do think he has changed their offense, and there may not be a better trio of offensive weapons in the league than McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, and George Kittle, when all 3 of those guys are healthy and playing. But the San Francisco 49ers defensively, Wes, they have not given up a point in the second half of 4 straight games. 4 consecutive second half shutouts on defense. I mean, that's like unheard of. They gave up, before Halloween, they gave up 30 points in the second half to the Kansas City Chiefs when they lost kind of a shootout game to Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
And since that game, prior to Halloween, they have not given up a point in the second half of a football game. That team that team is absolutely scary right now, in my opinion, even though record-wise they're not getting the attention that the Eagles and the Vikings are getting. San Francisco is the team I absolutely would not want to play right now.
If you want to play, if you don't want to play, but if you're going to play San Francisco, make sure you get them in September or October.
No kidding, man.
Because the way that
Holy
Kyle
cow.
Shanahan gets that team trending in November and December and into January, they're always building momentum. And two, I mean, DeMeco Ryans has to be a guy that is going to be a legitimate top-tier head coaching candidate.
No question
this year.
about it. No
and when
question
that
about
happens, I'm really going to feel bad about myself because now I officially am starting to feel old. That DeMeco Ryans is going to be a head coach in the National Football League. Defensive coordinator, I can take that. But if he ends, it's like, man, it is now you're starting to get there, right? You know, Graham Harrell ends up becoming a head coach here at some point. That's what makes you feel old, you know,
Yeah.
in the National Football League or in college football. But be that as it may, the 49ers just find ways to win football games and to hold the Saints in check the way they did, to hold Alvin Kamara in check the way they did. Again, it's another one of these football teams you just do not want to face. And how about this, Mike? We can close on this maybe. The NFC West, everybody just anticipated, okay, how many playoff teams are coming out of there this year? Seahawks, maybe they'll be the ones that will be in the back there. Geno Smith or Drew Lock, nobody's looking at them.
Yeah.
3 playoff teams maybe if you were asking people in week 1. NFC East, okay, maybe Philadelphia challenges Dallas, but otherwise, it's just when you actually play these games, it's just you have to do it out on the grass.
Well, and what
shows you how
everybody
things
was
can change.
saying along those same lines about the AFC West
Yeah.
and the
yeah.
quarterbacks in that division. Now, there's still a lot to play out, and obviously the Raiders now have won back-to-back overtime games, and maybe they're going to make a late season run like they did last year and get themselves into the picture. The Chargers, I think, could still be very dangerous. The Chiefs are the Chiefs. The Broncos have really struggled. But everybody thought, you know, the AFC West with those 4 quarterbacks was going to be the dominant division in football, and it hasn't turned out that way.
Nope.
So, as you say, you have to play the games and see what happens. And it's going to be really fun to see how all of this unfolds in the playoff picture and everything down the stretch. It's not going to be fun for the Packers not to be a part of it if they can't, you know, put together a crazy winning streak here down the stretch.
How many wins will it take? We're going to jot this down, Justin, our producer right now, because Marvin is on holiday. How many wins will it take for the NFC South? How many wins to win the division?
Oh, I think 9-8. I think 9-8 could win that division.
I'm wondering 8 and 9. Now
You think a sub 500 division champion out of the NFC South?
I just
Hey,
love that.
It wouldn't shock me.
I just love that.
If you're asking me for what I think it'll be 9-8. But
The Saints get smacked, and they're still like a game and a half out of the lead right
Yeah.
now in that division.
yeah, that's the division to be in if you want to be clinging to realistic playoff hopes when things haven't gone your way, and we'll see what happens there. Yeah, that was, I mean, for the Buccaneers to lose in overtime at Cleveland, that was a game they were chalking up as a victory for sure to try to take command of things. Didn't work out that way, and now Tampa Bay's fighting an uphill climb as well. So with that, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team. We've got it all for you on Packers.com. For Wes, I'm Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next time.